You really need a whole kit with your vehicle, especially for the winter. You should have an ice scraper in your car and a snow brush. This time of year, batteries are stressed. So a little jump pack that you can keep, you can usually plug them in once, charge them up, and they're good for at least one jump start. I really recommend folks have their cell phones charged when they travel, maybe some food, just not like crazy dinner meals, but, some granola bars, that kind of thing go a long way. It's hard to keep water in your car this time of year because it freezes up, but definitely having some sort of liquid or maybe Gatorade or something in the car would go a long ways as well.
When the days get shorter, temperatures start dropping into the teens, and scraping frost off the windows becomes routine, many feel winter has arrived. For those who go strictly by the calendar, winter officially arrives December 21st. Regardless, winter in Kansas is often unpredictable. As a result, now is the time to start preparing for what can be rapidly changing conditions. On today's Sound Living, winter weather safety. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wickman. In a typical Kansas winter, Kansas State University meteorologist Chip Redmond says we'll face a number of weather-related challenges. Chip, we're still several weeks away from the official start of winter, but really winter weather can hit just about any time and really extend sometimes even beyond winter in Kansas. So it's a good idea to really have some winter weather safety tips in mind just to help us through this next 3 or 4 months. In terms of that, when we think about winter weather safety, what's maybe the first thing that comes to your mind?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind for winter weather safety is just the cold. It brings with it different dangers, kind of like the same thing with the heat in the summertime, where if your bodies just aren't prepared to take cold for long periods of time. And just as we can in summer get heat illness if we're exposed too long, same comes for winter, is if we don't prepare and dress properly, the cold can quickly have negative results, especially when we factor in the wind and look at the wind chill. It can have big-time impacts to our body and result in frostbite and hypothermia pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's unusual. You hear them sometimes talking on the weather channels about how quickly your skin can freeze and things can start to take effect. And really, it can be just a matter of minutes in some cases.
Yeah, especially as we get colder and we add more wind, you can get down to less than minutes even when we start talking about the sub-zero temperatures. And so it's a trend downward. So the temperatures near 30 degrees and wind are not as severe as, say, negatives. And that's why we look at things like schools getting closed once temperatures drop typically below zero or below -10 wind chills. We start to see much, much higher risk as a result, and therefore we have to take more proactive and just try to avoid outdoor activity as much as possible.
Layering also comes into play there as well, and really how much clothing we can get on.
Yeah, and the type of layering too. So, the body releases a lot of its heat to your head. So stocking cap goes a long way to keep that heat in and keeps the overall ambient temperature of your body warmer. And then really appendages, things like your fingers and toes are most exposed and can cool off the quickest, and therefore they're usually the first thing that get damaged with cold weather. So mittens go a long ways because gloves still release that heat throughout the finger and allow more of that cold air to go into. You get mittens, all your fingers are kept together, and they typically can stay much warmer. As a result, you don't have as big of a threat, at least in the short term, for frostbite.
We always hear about keeping your head covered, and that's another area that needs some protection.
Yeah, that head, it loses all that heat out of it. We need to keep a stocking cap on. Cover those ears up because ears are super sensitive as well. They act just like the finger, too, where they're exposed much more. And they'll be the first thing damaged if you get caught out in the cold for a long time. And that also means, thinking about preparation like that in advance. So not just going outside to get the mail. Obviously, you want to be prepared and bundled up. But, a lot of folks are traveling for the holidays. And so, if you were to end up getting a stalled vehicle or stranded for some way, shape, or form, you need to make sure that you've got the proper clothing in your vehicle to be protected when your car starts to cool off or should you have to walk. And so you want to make sure you have those kind of clothes with you, even if you don't plan to go outside, because the cold is a real threat and it will persist all winter.
What about in terms of other things that you should keep in the vehicle to keep you safe, especially as you say while you're traveling?
Yeah, that's a great question. Your car should have a lot of stuff with it. You really need a whole kit with your vehicle, especially for the winter. Things such as a snow brush or ice scraper are an obvious go-to. We have frost. It's frequent in the wintertime here, and you're not allowed to drive your vehicle if you can't see out your windows. You're also not allowed to drive a vehicle if there's snow on it. It's dangerous. It poses a hazard to other people. You need to brush all that snow off, so you should have an ice scraper in your car and a snow brush. Granted, we haven't had as much snow lately, but that doesn't mean you can't have a potent storm and have concerns. Another thing you should keep in your car is a jump starter. This time of year, batteries are stressed. They get stressed the most when they're in cold and when they're very hot. And so as a result, we see a lot more batteries dying in vehicles. So a little jump pack that you can keep, you can usually plug them in once, charge them up, and they're good for at least one jump start. That's a great thing to have. If not that, then jumper cables go a long way as well. We talked about clothes already, and people need to have additional clothing. Blankets go a long ways. They can keep you covered up if you end up getting stranded, and they can keep you warm and protected from the elements. I really recommend folks have their cell phones charged when they travel, and maybe some food, just not like crazy dinner meals, but, some granola bars, that kind of thing go a long way. It's hard to keep water in your car this time of year because it freezes up, but definitely having some sort of liquid or maybe Gatorade or something in the car would go a long ways as well.
I may be showing my age here, but I also remember people talking about a tin can with some sand in it and maybe a candle or two to keep you warm if the heat goes out.
Yep, definitely. A candle will go a long way. It's kind of dangerous a little bit to have flame in the car. Nowadays, they've got those little instant warm packets that can go a long ways. You shake them up and they warm up. Those are great. I'd keep a couple of those in the car. Sand goes a long ways if you were to get stuck. Say we were traveling in snow, sand, even chains can be helpful to pull vehicles out or have your vehicle pulled out, and know where the anchor points are on your car. So if you do get pulled out, you don't rip a fender off in the process because you need to be able to anchor that vehicle. Some people have tire chains. That's probably a bit extravagant. If you need tire chains in Kansas, you probably shouldn't be on the road to begin with, but sand is very useful to help get more traction in an area that you don't.
It might also, though, be a good idea to have your tires looked at just to make sure that they're still in good condition.
Yeah, so this time of year, cold air, when the air in your tires gets cold, it shrinks. It basically takes up less space. So as a result, if you don't have properly inflated tires, you're going to start seeing the tire lights come on, and potentially you just drop a couple PSI in those tires, and you just need to top them off. And that goes a long way. I check all your air pressures, make sure they're at the right value, and then keep in mind, too, if it's really cold that day, you put a bunch of air in it to get up to, let's say you want to keep your tires at 35. When it gets warm, you might actually have to release some of that pressure to not over-pressurize those tires, too. So you just have to adjust as the temperatures adjust in your tires. And you want that optimal grip. So if you have underinflated tires or overinflated tires, you're not going to optimize the grip of that rubber. And as a result, you're going to slip and slide a lot more.
This is also a time when we might think about some other things around our home as well, because we get that heavy snow once in a while. We may get some ice, and that can cause a problem with nearby trees.
Yeah, if we haven't had a really good banger of an ice storm in a while, and I don't know as much cold air as we had this winter. I think there could definitely be some increased probability of ice storms across the state. Trees are probably the most likely to be damaged in an ice storm should we see ice accumulate. And so just be aware of weakened trees and be aware that you're going to lose branches out of those trees if we get enough ice. It takes around a quarter of an inch of ice to start to see really big impacts. Thankfully, a lot of times that ice doesn't accumulate on the road, so it's not as big of a problem. But anything that's standing and tall, such as power lines and trees and even like gutters and that kind of thing, can really be stressed when that additional weight is added with ice. So it's a good opportunity to get out there and just look for weakened trees and make sure you're prepared should a good significant ice storm occur.
We most likely will have to do some scooping this winter, maybe even some ice chipping on the sidewalks. Is there maybe some safer products now that we can use in terms of ice removal and snow removal?
I don't think there's too much of a safer product. Snow removal is one of the most stressful things that you can do, especially with heavy wet snow. It's very physically demanding. So snowblower, make sure your snowblowers run and are maintenance before the snowstorm comes, because the last thing you want to do is have a driveway that you need to clean out to get out and the snowblower doesn't run. So I really recommend using a snowblower with those heavier wet snows. Not all of us have it, so a lot of us push it. But just be aware of the physical demands. One of the leading causes of wintertime heart attacks are due to the pressures from shoveling snow. And then snow can get packed, it can become very icy, and you can't really scrape it off. And that's when you start to use salt or sand to help gain some traction in an area that might be hard to shovel or plow.
You mentioned travel before, and one of the things that I always remember someone telling me was, don't just check what the forecast is in your area, check the forecast along the way and your final destination so you know what to expect.
Yep. Conditions in the wintertime in Kansas can change rapidly. We could have a cold front come through, drop that temperature 50 degrees in a couple hours. It's definitely feasible, and as well as snow. We can go from clear skies to heavy snow very quickly. As a result, I really encourage people to know the forecast and also just check the road conditions. CanDrive, that's KANDRIVE.org, is the KDOT website to look at road conditions across the state and to assess if they're seasonal or if they're snow-covered or snow-packed. Additionally, you can also look at the webcams, too, to actually see the road conditions yourself. I really recommend that because if you're going to be traveling through conditions like that, you need to know how much longer it can take you. And then be aware of potential road closures. Kansas is a windy state. We throw some wind with some light snow on the ground. It could even be as much as less than an inch of snow on the ground. If we have 30, 40 mile an hour winds, it's going to blow and it's going to move and it's going to drift. It's going to make travel very challenging. And as a result, it's going to greatly deteriorate conditions, especially in the western half of the state. So as a result, a lot of times roads get closed. I-70 will get closed at some point this winter. And you just be prepared for those closings, and you'll know them in advance by checking CanDrive, and then you'll also be able to at least not get stuck on that exit where everyone's being forced off the road.
And the visibility from that is also greatly diminished when you have that blowing snow.
Yeah, it's not always traction. Visibility is the biggest concern, really, when we look at winters, because if you can't see what's coming up ahead of you, you can't stop in time, and you add into what potentially could be a big pileup and a big mess. Visibility with dust is also a big concern this winter just because we've got really dry, droughty conditions across the state. So dust is moving quite a bit, and as a result, visibility is just as bad as if it were to be in a blizzard. If you were to encounter low visibility areas where there's a lot of dust or blowing snow, slow down. Don't stop. Do not stop, because if you stop on the road, what's that person behind you going to do? They're not going to be able to see you. They're going to run into you. If it's completely unsafe, slow down and pull completely off the road and just wait it out. I really don't recommend people keep moving on the side of the road because the other drivers don't know what you're doing. You can turn on your hazards if you're stopped, but don't turn on your hazards when you're going through poor visibility areas. It actually doesn't help you be more visible. It makes it more of a challenge because the person behind you or in front of you might see just one side of that turn signal and they think you're turning. And so they're going to make judgment decisions based off that. So just keep your lights on, slow down, take your time, you're not in a rush, and pull off on the side of the road if it's completely unpassable.
I know especially at the holiday time, we like to get to our destination, but we really make sure that we can get there safely. That's the key, right?
That is the key, and there's a lot of ways that you can be much more defensive by just slowing down and thinking about your situation before you put yourself in a bad situation. And honestly, as much as you need to go see loved ones or friends, sometimes it's just best to know the forecast, know the road conditions, and just make the decision to stay home. It doesn't hurt. If anything, you're helping everyone else because you're not putting other people at risk if you were to start slipping and sliding.
A lot of information out there, and really, as we were saying, just be cautious and make sure that you can get to your destination and that you can really enjoy the holidays.
Yeah, I hope everyone has a great holiday period. It's going to be cold this winter. We're going to see more cold, I think, than what we saw last winter. Maybe some additional snow. We'll see. We do more cold. That helps for more snow, but just be safe. Take your time, think things out, and don't be in a hurry.
That's Kansas State University meteorologist Chip Redmond with information on winter weather safety. Chip is also the manager of Mesonet, a network of environmental monitoring stations across the state. To learn more, go to mesonet.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wickman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.